All right, so as I alluded to at the start, I am going to, along with the various members who are present from the design team currently, which I'll go ahead and do introductions right after I'm done with this, basically just give a broad overview of some key points to designing a game. And often this can even be exploded out to design in general. They're very fundamental aspects of design, and I think it'd be really great to share with you kind of how we design the game. With me, I have Monteria,
Hey
who,
guys.
coming all the way from Germany, helps me quite a bit on basically the mathy side of things. He's helped me with quite a few equations, spreadsheets, complicated things.
Oh, so that's what he does.
Yeah, Monteria's
Oh,
the brain.
not only.
So you never knew what he did?
um, I have Tall Tale. He is the designer of the cooking system in our game and the
Hello.
cooking cutie mark. He is also the lead designer on the project Role Playing is Magic. I would highly
Yay!
recommend you check it out. It's incredible. Like the amount of written, work to build such a world with the mechanics it's amazing. So definitely
Wow,
check
what a good
out Role
team.
Playing is Magic. Um, and I also have Lyra, who some of you may know. Lyra is working on specifically music and flying currently. They're mostly done, but Lyra is helping me, Monteria, and I with the cutie marks.
Yep.
And Techner, who isn't technically on the design team, but same with Monteria. But Techner is our awesome go-between. His programming knowledge when Justin isn't free is invaluable to helping us designers understand if our ideas are really possible. So
And then
Techner
Justin shuts
adds,
it down anyway.
yeah, Justin will just, well, yeah, but all right. So those are just some introductions. You'll see I also wrote disclaimer on here. Now, as we talk about this, I want to make it abundantly clear that I'm an amateur. As far as I know, everybody on this team is an amateur, basically.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
Um, and no two design firms or design studios are going to do things the exact same way. There's a lot of things that are considered standard practice, but there's also quite a bit of variation. So, the ideas and the topics we're going to be discussing, they're sort of prototypical. So don't take it as fact. If you're really interested, I definitely would recommend, just taking a look, researching a little bit. There's plenty of awesome documentation out there on all the things we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, design is very much an art. Everyone's going to do it a little differently.
Yep.
And my favorite is sitting Indian style with four incense and a pentagram
What?
around me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that
see,
took
I
a
go with
completely different turn.
I go
Don't
with the animal
forget the
sacrifice as well.
candles, dude.
Yeah.
Animal
forget the
sacrifice.
candles.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on to the first topic. The one-page pitch. As you may know of, it's more commonly related and talked about as the elevator pitch. While they're not the same, they have quite a few relations. I'm sure you've probably heard of, the elevator pitch. That's what you need to have ready if you want to get hired. It's a 30-second sort of blurb on who you are, why somebody would want to hire you. You have to convince them in the elevator. So that's the exact same principles of the one-page pitch. Usually a one-page pitch is 1 to 2 pages. I mean, I've written them before where they're 2 pages because I thought I couldn't fit all the information in a one page. But the goal is to really basically lay down the framework of your idea. You have to show really quickly at a glance the inspiration. You can mention references, and this brings up a really good point. Whenever you're talking about an idea that you have to be careful not to say things like, oh, my game is like X game, or, I really liked how in Metroid Prime you could turn into a ball, so in my game you can turn into a ball too. Well, by saying that, it kind of undervalues your own critical thinking, because you're saying it in a way that you're just saying your game is like X game because you liked it. What you instead would want to phrase it as is more about, like, I pulled inspiration from the Metroid ball mechanic and the concept that, you know, you could turn the player away from a very open space to a very confined space, in a quick amount of time, and the additional puzzle mechanic that the ball brings. And I used that idea as a reflection, to this idea in my game. So you kind of see how the second way that I talked about it, I'm still saying I used Metroid Prime as inspiration, but you really have to kind of go into what it was about, the specific thing in Metroid Prime that you liked, that you used the inspiration from. Um, so here's some four, what I like to call buzzwords. We'll get to buzzwords in a bit, but inspiration we went over. Synthesis, that is basically the combining of your ideas. So you get your inspiration. You think, oh, this is gonna be great. I want to do like a Half-Life game, but Minecraft, or something like that. And synthesis is all about taking those ideas and combining them together. So pulling the pieces from the ideas, pulling your own unique ideas and combining them with maybe tried and true, conventions within gaming. Um, and, that leads into resonance. So, once you have combined your ideas, you need to start working on how those ideas overlap or resonate with one another in a convincing manner. So, you can't just say, oh, I really liked Grand Theft Auto's open world, and I really liked, Fallout's VAT system, and I really liked, something else from another game. So that would definitely make a cool game if we stuck them all together. The resonance stage is all about finding out what works between your inspiration. And then the last stage is convergence, which means bringing it all together, adding it, to your finished concept, your one-page pitch. Now, it sounds like a lot to put into one page, and it is, but you really have to think about when you're pitching it to somebody, they're not going to care about you thinking about this idea for weeks or months. Like, they have a limited amount of time, they need something to draw them in, and then if you convince them, you can go into more detail. Does anybody want to talk about, like, buzzwords at all?
Buzzwords. Well, I mean, I think you could view this also. Well, okay. First of all, I really like things like the elevator pitch and the one-page pitch because it forces you to focus on your core concept. If you only have, the space of an elevator ride, if you've only got 30 or so seconds, you gotta hook whoever you're talking to, and it's. I forget who said it, but there's a line there's a quote I really like that says that people don't buy your product so much as they buy you and why you're doing something, not what you're doing, but why you're doing it. So if you can kind of sell the concept, you know what the concept is, you know that everything is informing your concept, and you can convey that. It's very good for focus. So I really like stuff like this and how it flows together and eventually loops back on itself.
Yeah. But that actually segues really well into one of the pitfalls of a one-page pitch, which is buzzwords. Now, again, this also relates to, if you're going out and you're looking to set yourself apart from, those around you in, let's say, an employment opportunity, Like how many top 10 buzzwords are you going to hear? Like innovative or creative. Trying to think of some more. What are like the major business ones? Like team oriented. Like innovative is
Yeah.
like my most hated buzzword. Like everybody's
Well, it's the
innovative.
most
Everything.
used.
I'm innovative. You're innovative. Our brain has different synapses that connect in different ways. We're all innovative. Great.
Right.
But so the trick is to just not get caught in those conventions. You don't want to make a document that says, this idea is innovative. It's a crutch. It just, it's telling the person who's reading that, you either don't want to take the time to explain why it's innovative or how it's innovative, or you don't know how or why it's innovative. So, it's really
Yeah.
important to avoid buzzwords as much as possible.
Yeah. Show don't tell is a good rule.
The other thing is when you advertise something like this, you're advertising not only the design but yourself. So you can't come off that way either.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. Because if you're going to be working on a team, for a whole production cycle, whether it's, 6 months, a year, 5 years, you need to have public speaking skills. You can't just come in with a document that's like, look at this, and then, you can't communicate to anybody else. All right, but yeah, and then the last point, real quick, understand the current rules to stay relevant. Basically, what I'm saying here is you need to know the buzzwords, you need to understand them, and once you do, you can find ways to break them to truly innovate. I should have put quotes around that. I'm breaking my own rules here. What am I? All right, let's go on to the next one. Now, your one-page pitch with the support of case studies for a more informed you. Now, case studies are basically taking a work in the field that you would like to study and analyzing various components within that work. Now, I know that sounds pretty vague, and it is pretty vague because a case study can have a lot of aspects to it. But most likely is you want to take a work and you want to figure out what makes it tick. Why it was successful if it was successful, why it was shocking if it was shocking, things like that. This is going to provide you with your foundation for what you're trying to create. If it's a game, you can't just go and create a game and not have ever played or even watched a game in your life. You're not going to know the precedents, so it's really important. And it's not just playing games. You can't just say, oh, I've played an MMO for years. I know how to make an MMO, or I've played every RPG on the planet. Like, I know I could help you guys. It's a lot about writing. You have to actually write things. Watch clips over and over again, even if they're only like 5 seconds long, to analyze camera angles and composition and everything. So
Yeah. You even if you're doing this while you are playing games, you have to be actively thinking of and analyzing the thing that you're doing. You have to know why it's evoking the kind of experience that it is and what systems are creating that. And yeah, there's, like you said, Puppy, there's a level of separation from just playing the game.
yeah.
Yeah.
So a few examples. These might not be the best examples, but when I was thinking about this presentation, I decided to put case studies into sort of two classifications. Now, this is not two columns. This should be looked at as a range. There's no A or B. It's the infinite number of points between A and B. And classical case studies in any genre or field would be something like, if you're looking at architecture, it's like the Pantheon or, the Empire State Building. For games, the Legend of Zelda, maybe, if you wanted to go as old school as like Pong. I wouldn't really use Pong so much, but kind of not the forerunner games, because they're sort of we're so evolved at that point that sometimes the concepts don't translate as well because it's such a long distance. But some of the mid-range games, like Zelda, of course, is always a good example. I put them as classical because these are sources which have been peer-reviewed and basically widely accepted. So if you do a case study on a classical game, like I'm going to play The Legend of Zelda, I'm going to play Metroid Prime. I keep coming back to that because that's like my favorite game. But they already have, great scores online. Reviewers, they've been reviewed to death. People know all about them. So you're going to be studying a quality piece. Now, the issue is exactly kind of what I just said is everybody else has already studied it to death too. So while you are updating your own knowledge, if you're going to do something classical, then there's usually less room to find, sort of that unique little part about the game because it's already been picked apart. Some more experimental case studies. This is what I like to call, kind of like the indie scene. Or I have League of Legends up here because I thought it was a pretty good example. You consider League of Legends. It's quite an astounding game if you just consider its successes in recent years. $2 million jackpot for their pro scene. It basically revitalized an entire genre, the MOBA. What is it? Massive
Dota.
Online.
Dota, Defense of the Ancients.
No, it's a MOBA,
The-
though. Massive
Yeah,
online.
the genre is called
Online
MOBA.
Battle Arena.
Dota is
Yeah.
just the origin game.
Yeah,
or
so
game bulk of
Okay.
that.
I mean, it completely revolutionized the entire idea of what a MOBA is. And on top of it, probably their most new and successful scheme to date, besides the gameplay itself, is purely their monetization scheme. Think about how League of Legends makes money. It gives you so much free content, and all it asks for in return is, if you want to spend money, you can buy custom skins. It's one of the very few games out there where you can't pay to get better. I mean, I guess you can in a little bit of a sense, but not really. Most like games that cost, have microtransactions, you can just pay to get better. You can just pay to have more experience, to level up faster. The League of Legends is not like that, and those are the reasons why I consider it to be more of an experimental case study because it's still new. Now,
Well, it's they very much are also on the cutting edge. Not to cut in on you, but they're doing they're trying to get their community to be kind of a nicer place, and they're doing that. What's it? The karma system that they have running in there, and that's the first I'd ever heard of something like that. So they have kind of a unique position where they can push the envelope and try new things. And so yeah, I mean, definitely experimental.
yeah, and
And also the amazing fact about League of Legends is that it just works, and it works pretty good. And from a design point of view, you just want to find out why it works that good, and you cannot simply just guess it while playing it. You really need to look at it and look at what they do.
yeah. All right, so that is case studies, very important. Now the next topic I'm going to move on to is methodology. Now this is I had to add
God.
this because it was like my favorite thing in school.
Yeah,
learning
this is
about.
Propy.
Yep.
But basically,
Nope.
and the design document also brought to you in part by Methodology for a more informed you. Now, the reason why I say informed is it's a sort of a little joke is that methodology is kind of, it gets like meta, it's like, oh, you're meta, you're thinking about methodology. But the idea is, and this is the simplest way that I could put methodology, is did you research how the researcher researched during your research?
Okay.
Now,
Nice, I like that.
Yo, dog.
it's a bit of a tongue twister, but it's a
Really?
very simple way to bring up the discussion of methodology because when you research something, a lot of times, we'll go to the library. Who does that? I still went to the library and it was great.
Wow.
And you see all these books by these like, authors that are peer reviewed and published. And, a lot of times it's really easy and not really expected of you to question those authors. You know, who are you to question an author who has a published, peer reviewed book? But that's really what enriches your designs because, if somebody's designing a game, let's say I'm out there designing a game, I'm designing Legends of Equestria, and, it completes, and then I write a document up on it and whatever, and then somebody else comes along and they're like, wow, I think I'm going to check up on Popey's methodology. So what would go into that is if that person looked at my background in design in general. So looking at what influenced me, how not just the ideas that I came up with, but what could have influenced me personally to come up with those ideas. Um, it's a bit difficult to get your mind thinking about it all the time because a lot of times we passively consider this, but the trick is moving it into our active conscious. So you question who is writing your work and how they created it on top of the work itself.
Right. Yeah, a good example that I like on methodology, not from games so much, but is actually from comics or comic strips, and it's Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes, classic. I mean, classic comic strip. Everybody loves it, but you can get a lot more out of it by knowing and researching Bill Watterson, what he is like as a person, and why, and that informs why the strip changed over the years and why certain things were done in certain ways. But yeah, it's the researcher researched. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I don't like to brag, but I do have every Calvin and Hobbes edition.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, that's my short little spiel on methodology. It's really fun and it just helps you to inform yourself a bit better on what you're looking to design. All right. All right, now we get to move on to the exciting part, which is the design doc or
Yay.
document if you don't want to be hipster about it.
Okay.
But
Glasses on my glasses.
Double glass.
Exactly.
so the design document is your core go-to document. It will basically have all of the ideas in your game at a medium level description so that anybody who needs to can reference those ideas in a I guess I should say like a regimented fashion, because it can't just be all in one designer's head. That causes issues. It needs to all be written down, and that's what the design document is for. Now, what goes into a design document? I don't want to pretend like I know, exactly what you need to write a good doc. It's a very wide range, You may write a manifesto if you're an artist. Your design document could be like, some abstract like personal biography if you're a writer. If you're designing games, depending on your game, workflow, your team, everything can cause changes to a design document. So, but what I have created is what I think are very general overviews to what is in a design document versus a design spec. Now, these 5 areas: overview, features, gameplay, broad rules, and level design. Now, some of the work that I'm pulling from is a book called Game Architecture and Design by Andrew Rollings, and these were the main headings that he said. Now, I agree with them mostly. I put quotations around level design because I don't believe in using the word level, because that I feel like that'll make you force you into a convention that you need levels. So,
Yeah.
but you know, this is a pretty decent spectrum of some of the key parts you would see on a design document versus a more detailed design spec.
Yeah, the way I tend to approach a design document is, I mean, I tend to go a little bit more, I suppose, conceptual with it, but I start with, the core concept and then aesthetics and kind of just build from that core outward into specifics. But I feel like the purpose of the design document as opposed to the design spec is very much to try to convey the vision that you're going for, so that anybody that picks up your design doc can kind of see into your head. Because really, no game idea springs from the mind of a designer, fully formed, like Athena from the mind of Zeus. But like, it's just important to kind of have a roadmap, and you've got the design spec that's very much more technical and more in depth, and the design document is supposed to get your vision. It's the best term I can think of for it. Convey your vision.
Yeah.
To just tell you what the game is, I guess.
Kind of, yeah. Get it into your head. Infect other people with it.
It's like a zombie plague.
Actually, that's
Exactly.
what memes are. So
Yeah,
Just saying.
pretty much.
Yeah, so, the design doc is. And don't think programmers will ever read it. It was even in my published. There was
Yeah.
a section in my published book that I'm researching from that literally says programmers won't read your design doc. But, it's really all about getting your ideas down, and this is going to be the core doc that the rest of the team pulls from. If you're unavailable. So, the writing team is going to pull ideas from key design mechanics to determine what they can do in quests. The programming team is going to start to break up the chunks of the document into, sort of components they need to add into their programming. Art directors are going to start drawing concept art based on areas and key design principles you've made here. So, this is a really important doc. I can't really think of a good average length for one of these. Maybe like 30 to 100 pages or something.
Oh man, I don't know. I think it varies. Varies very much project to project.
Yeah. So
Yeah, like I've seen really good design docs that were, a page, 2 pages, but it depends on how you convey the idea.
that's true. I'm kind of thinking of a design doc for like an MMO. If you were to do like a
Right?
like a phone, like a little bit simpler phone game, it probably could be a lot more succinct.
Oh
Yeah, I mean, take Doodle Jump. How much can you explain about that game? I mean, I guess it would fit on one page.
All
I've
right.
it's
never-
also an
like a-
arcade game. Arcade games are simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Simple
Yeah.
but fun.
There's still games. I mean,
Yeah.
Anyway, we got
Well,
our
and-
half hour mark. Just letting you know.
Perfect.
Yep.
And are we
So
even half?
my next slide is it would sure be cool if. Now this
Oh,
this
God.
is a note about feature creep.
Yeah.
Now this is the point where you've already gotten your pitch approved. You're working on, fleshing out the design document, maybe even working on the design spec, and you think, wow, things have changed since I wrote my pitch. It would really be great if I could take, this newer, more updated idea and add it or replace it with this other idea. Now, the tricky thing, as is in many situations which I've presented, is it's a range. Of course, there's going to be changes. A project is never going to run smoothly from concept to shipment. So you're going to have to be prepared for when you do need to make changes. But you need to not let your features creep up on you and add additional work. Now, not to say, of course, I'm talking about it now, and this just happened to me, honestly. In our project, I was working on combat with Monteria, and we had this really cool idea for this ability, which had basically you would suck in enemies around you. When you did something, enemies would all suck in, kind of like a pull. But this is actually quite complicated to program because it involves changing the locational data of multiple, creatures on a server and a client basis. So it turns out we cut that because it was too complicated for just one ability. It was just too much. So you always have to be aware what is possible and what isn't, and communicating with the programmers is probably the best way to figure that out.
A little, and just to add to that is when you're creating a general design idea, not the specifics yet, you want to communicate to the programmers what you want, such as stun mechanics or knockback, so they can add that to the game so you can put those into your abilities when you have the specific details. Otherwise, they have to do that on the spot, and that's what gets really hard and time consuming.
Right.
Yeah. All
Yep.
right. So now I'm going to give you a little more of a sneak peek as to how the abilities are working in Legends of Equestria. Now, I'm not going to give you any specifics, but I know that design has sort of been under wraps for the longest time. So I'm going to talk about sort of an evolution we did in abilities here. And basically we were an MMO and we know we wanted abilities. We wanted you to have cool abilities that were unique to your specific cutie mark. And to do this, the initial thing we were thinking of was having each cutie mark give you around, like 12 to 15 abilities. That was the initial idea, like, years ago, I think before even I joined. Eventually that was shaved down a bit because we found that having that many abilities multiplied by the number of cutie marks we wanted to have would get really complicated. So
Right.
you'll see the next step, well, there was a few steps in between, but the next big step, I'd say, was this left diagram. Now, this is an idea to slim down the number of abilities required. Each color is a cutie mark, and each little circle was to represent an ability. So this was just a really early framework trying to conceptualize how abilities were going to upgrade and how you were going to purchase them. Now this was a good idea and we were going to go with it, but we later hit a few other things we wanted to change to both simplify the process and make it more user friendly. And that's when we moved on to this right system, which is currently an iteration of this is what we're using. So, this is really a good look at how abilities are going to be structured. And the idea is that you now have an ability, and you will have upgrades to that ability. So we don't want an ability to ever go obsolete. That was a major change. And I know it sounds kind of obvious now that I think about it, but some games you get a new
Hindsight.
ability and it replaces an old ability. You get your new magical bolt and it replaces your old magical bolt. What we're moving towards is a model where an ability will never become outdated. It will always be there. You can always use it and it's always viable, and you have the option to upgrade it. So let's say, this right side, this blue circle was a buck, an earth pony comes up and bucks you. So the idea is that the base ability would be the buck, and then you would get 3 upgrades to that buck. Now, one of those upgrades could be like, how much stamina you reduce. Another one could be like cooldowns. Another one could be additional effects. But importantly is that what this allows is a little bit less complication in the process of programming too. Because these upgrades are meant to be numerically based. You increase a slow duration from 10% to 20%, or I'm sorry, a slow amount by 10% to 20%. That's only a slight tweak in numbers. So instead of each tree having 12 different unique abilities, we can now cut it down to 6 or 8, but they're still very unique and varied in the upgrade paths that you can take. And does anybody want to add to that?
Well, it lets you kind of customize how you want to play.
Pretty
You
much.
can stick with the way that you with the abilities that you like and that you want to play, and just tweak them so that they're very much in your play style. And I mean, who knows if this is what we're going to end up with, but it's where we're going now.
And that's
So-
ignoring the fact that you can. I mean, you didn't even mention the fact that you can only upgrade so much. Because right
Yep.
now it just sounds
Right.
like you can upgrade them as much as you want, but the upgrades share the same points. So you can choose to go for more damaging abilities on some, more utility. It's up to you, and you only have so much that you can put into your abilities. And that's also ignoring the fact that if you level up a little bit, that affects things even further. It's not just the upgrades that affect how the abilities perform.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's highly customizable.
Yeah, and that's really the point, because I mean, from the get-go, having an option to pick one cutie mark over another is a hugely, significant factor, and we really wanted to reflect that in the show. When you get your cutie mark, it's like the best moment of your life. So, the idea is you get to pick your cutie mark, and you're going to be better at your cutie mark than people who don't have your cutie mark, both aesthetically and mechanically too. You're going to have abilities that are going to be slightly better than your friends who don't have a cutie mark in that same area, which, that's how, if you get a cutie mark in healing people, like medical, you're obviously going to be better at healing than somebody who doesn't have their cutie mark in it. So, I mean, that sounds pretty straightforward, but, that customization, high-level customization with this lower-level upgrade customization, you can really build just about any class you want.
Yeah.
All right. The design spec. Now, I'm not going to go too into detail of this, but the design spec is your next-level document from your design doc. Now, this is all about the details. I come back to my Metroid example. Is the design doc would say I can roll in a ball. It would show, how I roll, maybe say why I roll and in what areas I can roll in. But the design spec is going to go into exactly how that roll works. The transformation from human or pony to ball, how you're going to animate that. Have you ever
What?
played a Metroid game and you're like, well, how does, look at those in between frames and see how they convincingly make you believe that Samus can go from full size to tiny ball.
Right.
And they use a lot of flashes and convincing morphing to make it work pretty well. But yeah, the design spec is going to have your mechanics, your equations, your spreadsheets, your graphs, your diagrams. It's going to really be the detailed, the nitty-gritty area of your design document library. Now, moving away from designing a specific document and onto maybe more of like a team-based, I just wanted to touch upon how design teams are usually set up. Now, usually this is the convention right here. Art, design management, programming, and music and FX. These are usually the fundamental areas in any studio that is creating a game. Of course, they can vary, but that's basically it. And down here is sort of a breakup of how you would how you would break up these roles into more organized sort of branches. Now, I wanted to give an example of kind of how LOE is structured. You'll see that this is quite different, but there is a method behind the madness. It's not just because we threw some marbles on a table and that's how they landed. It was one very important reason why we're set up this way is to decentralize basically decentralize the leaders of the team. Now, many of you know that we've been around for some time now, and as a fan-based game, you need to be prepared for, eventual times when somebody may get more busy, like if they're going to school after summer break, or if they're doing, they're doing something else. So by having a more decentralized system, we're not relying on one project director, manager, producer to know everything. Because, if you look at the right system, imagine if you just were to cut off this top area. You just cut the head off of the Hydra. You know what I mean? It's a lot more crippling if you lose each one of these, like one of these people in this sort of system, and there's less communication between the areas. You'll see in our area, teams communicate with other teams a lot more closely than in a sort of a rigid hierarchy like this. So that's the team, and now, if we have time, I think we still do. This was the release that I promised earlier.
You did?
I did. I did
I was not there
say
for that.
that we were going to talk about the tension system. Now,
That's right.
this
Yep.
is a
Our
Awesome.
baby.
Totally not centered.
a system which has been in the works for. Yeah, you'll see these black boxes. That's because I can't really reveal that too much.
Yeah,
Those
we had to do
Can't
that.
show any. We can't show everything.
Yeah, the NSA. We had
The
to.
tension's unbearable.
But yeah, the idea is now, unlike most MMOs where, the fundamental point system is basically hit points. You reduce hit points, a creature faints or dies, and you get experience from that. That is a very conventional way to set up an RPG. Now, what we decided to do was create a stamina system where, by having a confrontation with an enemy, you reduce an enemy's stamina, but it depends on what type of ability you're using. So, like one of our abilities we're thinking of right now is it's called Pillow Barrage. Now,
Really?
don't
Oh yes.
this is just a
God.
don't hold me to having this, but the idea was you
Why?
throw pillows at an enemy target and they could pile up around your enemies, slowing them. Now, this would be an example of a soothing ability. Now, another type of ability could be, your more really cool, like kind of badass looking ability, like what would be a good thing? Like arrow barrage. We'll just use the same words, where you shoot a whole bunch of magical arrows in the sky and they come down and hit your target. That is more of an anger-inducing ability. So the idea is that if you use a lot of soothing type abilities, you will be able to you'll soothe the creature, and this bar right here would look more like this, where the creature is heavily soothed. Now, when a creature is heavily soothed, certain effects will happen to that creature. Now, I don't want to release those effects, but the idea is that a heavily soothed creature will have certain trade-offs, downfalls or no, what am I trying to think of? Bonus.
Depending on how close it is to the soothe or the anger side, the battle changes, and it's not really preferable to be really far on either side. You should try to balance it in the middle if you can.
Yeah.
Right. It ends up meaning that people can come at a confrontation situation with their own ideas, and everybody can help.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
and it also allows you, sure you can go and use like magical bolt, but if you really wanted to stick to the true, pony, style, which, is kind of targeted to a younger demographic, initially anyway, we're giving an option out there to have sort of a much less violent, even we're already not violent, it's cartoon violence, which is in just about any game. We're going one step further and actually creating a way you can still have a confrontation, but it's not overtly violent in its, its presumptions.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to kill the enemy or that sort of thing. You just have to end the conflict, and you can do that in different ways.
Yeah.
In this case, we reduce their stamina until they basically faint.
Yep.
Yeah, you soothe them to death.
There is
I
no
wouldn't
death
say
in
that.
Equestria. What are you
Basically,
talking about?
they
I
just
just
don't
like
want
that.
to fight you anymore.
You soothe them to exhaustion.
Yeah.
That's. We also didn't mention the fact that perhaps some enemies may play off of the tension bar on
Oh,
either
yeah.
end. So we
The
could
behavior
introduce. Right, we could introduce down the line, farther down the line for sure, specific behaviors. Some enemies might not like being soothed. That might not be a good idea. Some enemies
Yep.
not like being angry. Some enemies might have the bar be erratic and you have to keep balancing it yourself even if you're not the one shoving it to the right, So we could play with that too. It's not just something that you have to stare at and keep in the center. It's not just a teeter-totter. We can play with that as much as we want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Good
So
times.
that is the presentation.